night Selah Pruitt turned 26. She spent it alone in the back of her uncle's laundromat, eating a gas station sandwich and listening to the dryers spin. No party, no cake. No phone calls except the one from her parole officer reminding her that her check-in was moved to Thursday. She didn't mind. She had learned, somewhere between juvie at 15 and a 2-year stint at Decatur Women's Correctional at 23, that birthdays were just Tuesdays, with extra pressure, to pretend things were fine. Things were not fine, but they were getting better, slowly, the way a broken bone heals. Not all at once, not without pain, but something underneath shifting back into place. She had been out 14 months of folding other people's clothes, mopping the back bathroom at closing, saying yes ma'am and no sir to customers who looked right through her. Her uncle, Desmond Pruitt, had given her the job without asking too many questions. He was her mother's older brother, a quiet man who chewed toothpicks and kept a Bible on the counter that he never opened in front of anyone. He didn't talk about her past. He didn't talk about much, but he was there every morning at 6:30, unlocking the door, and that counted for something. The laundromat was called Pruitt's Clean. It sat on the corner of Alden and Sycamore in a small Georgia town called Mossfield, population 9,000 if you counted the new subdivision out near the highway. It was the kind of town where everyone knew your car, your grandmother's name, and approximately how much trouble you'd been in. Selah knew that. She felt it every time she walked to the gas station for her lunch, and the woman behind the counter smiled just a fraction too late. She did not let it stop her. She told herself that every morning in the mirror, with varying degrees of success. The first Wednesday of October, a man came in at 7 minutes past closing. Selah had already run the floor mop over the tile once and was working on the second pass near the front window when headlights swept across the glass. She straightened up. The sign on the door said closed. She had flipped it herself 20 minutes ago. The man who pushed through the door was somewhere in his 40s, wearing a canvas jacket with a tear at the left elbow. He was carrying a black trash bag twisted at the top, the universal laundromat luggage of someone in a bad week. "We're closed," Selah said, not unkind, just honest. He stopped. His face did something complicated, not anger, just a kind of tired negotiation happening behind his eyes. "I can see that. I'm sorry. My daughter has a school thing tomorrow and she's got nothing clean. Her uniform, I mean. They sent a note home last week and I forgot and..." He stopped himself, pressed his lips together. "Never mind. You're closed. I'm sorry." He turned to go. Selah looked at the bag. She looked at the clock. She looked at the man's jacket with the torn elbow. "Machine 2 is already warm," she said. "You got quarters?" He turned back around. "What? Quarters? The machine takes quarters. You got them or not?" He dug into his jacket pocket and produced a fistful of change, loose and jangling. She didn't count it. She just nodded toward the back row. "Leave it running when you go," she said. "I'll move it to the dryer when the cycle's done. Pick it up tomorrow morning before 9. He stared at her for a moment like she'd spoken in a language he hadn't heard in a long time. Are you sure?" "I'm mopping either way," she said, and went back to her mop. His name was Warren Gable. She learned that the next morning when he came back at 8:15, before her uncle had even arrived, he was wearing the same jacket, same torn elbow, but his face was different, rested maybe, or just less desperate. He handed her the folded uniform in a small backpack, his daughter's name written on the tag in permanent marker. Bria, 4th grade. He said thank you twice, once at the door, and once from the sidewalk, turning back like he'd almost forgotten something. She waved him off and went back to the register. She didn't think about it much after that. There was always something to think about that was more pressing. The dryer in slot 7, that was running hot. The man who kept leaving his socks in machine 5. The fact that her uncle had been coughing for 3 weeks straight and refused to see anyone about it. Desmond was 61 and had the particular stubbornness of a man who had survived things by refusing to acknowledge them. He'd grown up in Mossfield, left for Atlanta in his 20s, come back in his 30s after something happened that he never fully explained, and built Pruitt's Clean from a single-used machine in a storefront that used to be a shoe repair shop. He'd run it for 23 years. He knew every customer by name, remembered their schedules, occasionally set aside a dryer sheet for the woman on Maple who always forgot them. He was a good man. Selah knew that in the uncomplicated way you know certain things, not because you analyzed it, but because you felt it. When he started losing weight in November, she noticed before he admitted it. When he started sitting down more between customers, she rearranged the back room without asking, so the chair was closer to the register. When he finally said one Tuesday morning while the machines were spinning, "I might need to see a doctor," she just nodded and said she'd drive him. "You don't have a car," he said. "Warren Agable has a truck," she said. Her uncle gave her a look. She shrugged. She'd seen Warren 4 times since October. He came in every other Saturday, always with the same black trash bag, always too early or too late. They'd exchanged maybe 40 words total. But he had a truck and she needed one, and she figured asking was the worst he could do. She was right. He said yes before she finished asking. The doctor's name was not important. What was important was what he said, and what he said was this. Desmond had a mass on his pancreas. They needed to run more tests. It might be early. It might not be. Selah drove her uncle home in Warren's truck, which smelled like sawdust and fast food, and a pine air freshener that had long since stopped smelling like pine. Desmond sat in the passenger seat and looked out the window at Mossfield going by. The hardware store, the old movie theater that was now a church, the intersection where the light had been broken for 2 years. "You're not going to say anything?" Selah said. "I'm thinking," he said. "About what?" "About whether I closed the register right before we left." Desmond. "The register." Selah. "I think I left it on the tray." She tightened her hands on the wheel. She didn't say anything else. She knew what he was doing. She'd done it herself, more times than she could count. Fill your head with small logistical things so the big thing can't get in. It was a survival skill. She wasn't going to take it away from him. She drove. The pine air freshener swung from the mirror. Outside, Mossfield looked exactly the same as it always had, which felt, in that moment, like the cruelest possible thing. The tests came back 2 weeks later. Not early, not the news anyone wanted. The doctor said 6 to 8 months with treatment. Possibly longer, possibly less. These things were never perfectly predictable, he said, in the careful, practiced way of a man who had delivered this sentence many times and still hadn't found a good way to do it. Desmond listened, nodded, asked 2 questions about cost. Thanked the doctor for his time. In the parking lot afterward, he sat in the passenger seat of Warren's truck, which Selah had borrowed again, and which Warren had offered without her even having to explain why. And he looked at the steering wheel for a long moment. "The laundromat," he said. "Don't," Selah said. "I'm not being morbid. I'm being practical." He turned to look at her. "It's paid off. No debt. I own the building. I want to put it in your name. Desmond, you're the only one who knows how to fix the machine in slot 7. You're the only one who knows how to fix the machine in slot 7, she said. "I just watch." "Same thing," he said. "That's how I learned too." She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She looked out the windshield at the parking lot of the medical building, a place that looked entirely too cheerful for what happened inside it, with its yellow flower beds and its clean white signage. "We'll talk about it later," she said. "All right," said Desmond. And then, after a moment, "Thank you for driving me." "You're thanking me for driving someone else's truck." "I'm thanking you for asking someone for the truck," he said. That was the harder part. She didn't have an answer for that, so she started the engine. Word travels in a small town the way water moves through dry ground. Quietly, invisibly, and then all at once. By the end of November, people in Mossfield knew that Desmond Pruitt was sick. They knew the way people in small towns know things without any single person meaning to tell them. Through the pharmacist who filled the prescriptions, through the cousin who overheard the phone call, through the particular silence that descends when someone carries hard news on their face and doesn't know how to hide it. The customers started coming after that. Not more, exactly, but with a different weight. They lingered a little longer. They asked Desmond how he was feeling, and actually waited for the answer. The woman on Maple who always forgot dryer sheets started bringing 2, leaving the extra one on the folding table with no note. Selah watched all of this and felt something she couldn't quite name. Not gratitude exactly. Not yet. More like recognition. Like she was seeing something she'd always suspected existed but had stopped believing in somewhere around age 15, when the world had shown her a different version of itself. She had been so angry for so long. Not in a loud way, in a quiet, calcified way, the kind that doesn't make you yell, just makes you careful. Careful about who you trust, careful about what you let yourself need. She'd built a life around not needing things she might not get. And then this town. This same town that had watched her get arrested at 21 with visible relief, that had noted her return from prison, with the kind of silence that says we expected this. This same town was leaving extra dryer sheets on the folding table and asking Desmond if he needed rides to his appointments. She couldn't reconcile it. She tried, late at night when the machines were quiet, but she couldn't make it fit with the story she'd been telling herself for 10 years. Warren Gable came in on a Saturday in early December, later than usual. He had his daughter with him this time. Bria was 9 years old, with 2 braids and the deeply serious expression of a child who read too much and found most adults somewhat disappointing. She stood next to the machine and watched it spin with the focused attention of someone studying a problem. "She's been asking about you," Warren said, loading quarters into slot 2. "Me?" Selah said. "The lady who washed her uniform," Bria said, without looking up from the machine. "That's what I call you. I didn't know your name." "Selah," she said. Bria tested the sound of it. "That's a real name from the Psalms," she said. Selah blinked. "Yeah, it is. My grandma named me from a gospel song," Bria said. "She said names should mean something." "Your grandma was right," Selah said. Warren looked at his daughter with the particular expression of a father who is simultaneously proud and slightly exhausted. He turned back to the machine and fed in the last of the quarters. The drum started turning. After a moment, without looking at her, he said, "I heard about your uncle." Selah straightened a stack of folded towels that didn't need straightening. "Word travels. Are you doing all right? Running the place on your own most days?" "I'm fine. I'm a contractor," he said. "Finish work mostly. Trim, cabinetry, some tile. If you ever need anything fixed around here, machines, shelves, whatever, you can ask. I owe you. You don't owe me anything." "The uniform," he said. "You didn't have to do that. It was a load of laundry. It was closing time," he said. "And you let me in anyway." She didn't have an answer for that either. She was finding that happening more often, and she wasn't sure what to do with it. December moved the way December does in a small southern town, slowly until Christmas week, then all at once. Desmond started his first round of treatment the second week of the month, and the side effects hit him harder than he let on. He came into the laundromat on Tuesdays and Thursdays, shorter shifts because she'd told him she could handle it, and he'd looked at her for a long moment before believing her. She could handle it. Barely some days, but she could. What she hadn't expected was the help that arrived without being asked. Warren came on the second Saturday in December and spent 3 hours fixing the dryer in slot 7 without charging anything. He just showed up with his own tools, diagnosed the problem in 12 minutes, and got it done while Selah ran the front. When she tried to pay him, he shook his head. "You don't get to pay someone for a favor," he said. "That's not how favors work." "I didn't ask for a favor. I know you didn't," he said. Mrs. Thea Coulter, who was 81 and had been coming to Pruitt's Clean since it opened, started staying an extra half hour every Monday to help fold. She didn't ask. She just started doing it. When Selah tried to send her home, she said, "My hands still work and your table is full. Let me be useful." And Selah, who had spent 2 years in a place where no one was permitted to be useful in any way that mattered, found she could not argue with that. The pastor from the church 3 blocks over, a tall man named Reverend Birch, who Selah had been carefully avoiding since she got back to Mossfield because she suspected organized concern was coming, showed up on a Thursday with a covered dish and left it on the counter. "For Desmond," he said. "Don't tell him it's from me or he'll give it back." Then he left, which was more than she'd expected from a pastor. She was surrounded by help she hadn't asked for and wasn't sure she deserved. And it unsettled her in a way that nothing in Decatur Women's Correctional ever had, because prison she understood. The rules were clear. The hostility was reliable. This was something else entirely, and she didn't have a framework for it. She called her mother on a Tuesday night. Her mother, who lived in Memphis now and called on holidays and sometimes in between, listened to all of it without interrupting. "Sounds like a community," her mother said when she was done. "I know what it sounds like," Selah said. "I just don't know why they're helping. Why they're helping me. After everything." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Baby," she finally said, "they're not helping you. They're helping Desmond. They just can't do that without going through you." A pause. "But maybe that's the point." The third week of December, the furnace in the back of the laundromat stopped working. It wasn't critical. The machines kept the space warm enough. But the back room where Selah ate her lunch and Desmond sometimes rested between customers dropped to 52 degrees by evening. She'd propped a space heater in the corner and told herself she'd figure it out after the holidays. Warren figured it out before she could. He came in on a Saturday with a man named Joel Strand, who turned out to be an HVAC guy Warren had known since high school. Joel looked at the furnace, shook his head with the expression of someone paying respects to the dead, and said he'd need to order a part. 3 days, maybe 4. In the meantime, he left 2 electric panel heaters from his truck, heavy-duty ones that blew hot air in wide arcs. "How much for the heaters?" Selah asked. "They're loaners," Joel said. "Get 'em back to me when you're done." "And the part?" Joel looked at Warren. Warren looked at the floor. "Joel," Selah said. "Cost of parts," Joel said. That's it. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell them she could pay. She had some money saved, not much, but some, a slow accumulation of the last 14 months, and her pride was right there, ready to spend it. But she thought about Desmond, sitting in the cold back room on a Tuesday in December, with his canvas jacket zipped all the way up, coughing into his hand and saying he was fine, and she let it go. "Thank you," she said. It was harder to say than she expected. Joel shrugged. "Warren said you were good people." He picked up his tool bag. He's never wrong about that. Christmas morning, Selah opened the laundromat at 10. Desmond was supposed to rest. She'd told him so 3 times, and he'd agreed, which worried her, because usually he argued. She was in the back sorting a load someone had left overnight when she heard the front door open. She came out expecting a customer. There were always a few on Christmas, the apartments downtown with no machines, the single people who kept themselves busy on holidays, and stopped. Warren was standing there. He had Bria with him, and behind them were Joel Strand and his wife and Thea Coulter, and 2 people Selah didn't recognize who turned out to be neighbors of Warren's from Alden Street. They were all carrying things, food, mostly, but also 2 space heaters still in boxes, a folding table, a set of tools. "What is this?" Selah said. "We figured Desmond might want to come in today," Warren said, "even just for a little while, so we're making it comfortable." "We made food," Bria said, lifting a foil-covered dish with both hands. "I helped with the cornbread." Selah looked at Warren. "You did all this?" "We all did," he said. Thea called the neighbors. "Joel brought the heaters. Desmond doesn't know. We thought you could call him and tell him people wanted to see him." She looked at all of them standing in her uncle's laundromat on Christmas morning, the machines quiet for once, the light coming in low and gold through the front window. Thea Coulter had brought a poinsettia in a plastic pot and was already looking for somewhere to set it. Joel's wife was arranging things on the counter like she'd done it before. Selah Pruitt, who had spent 2 years being told in 100 different ways that she was someone to be contained rather than trusted, stood in the middle of all of it and felt something crack open in her chest. She didn't cry. She almost did. She pressed her palm flat against the folding table and breathed through it, the way she'd learned to breathe through hard things. "I'll call him," she said. Desmond came at noon. Warren picked him up, which was something they'd apparently arranged without telling her, and Desmond walked through the door of his own laundromat, looking like a man who has been ambushed by something good and doesn't know how to defend against it. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looked at the food on the counter, the poinsettia, the people in his space, people who knew his name, his schedule, how long he'd been in Mossfield, what he'd built here. He looked at Selah. "You did this?" he said. "They did," she said. "She let us," Warren said from behind him. Desmond didn't say anything for a moment. He pressed his lips together the way he did, when he was thinking something he wasn't sure how to say. Then he walked to the counter and began talking to Thea Coulter about the poinsettia and whether it needed more water and whether the red leaves were actually leaves or something else. Selah stood back and watched and understood, in a way she hadn't before, what her mother had meant. They couldn't help Desmond without going through her, and maybe that was the point. Maybe the kindness wasn't charity, wasn't pity, wasn't the complicated social transaction she'd been bracing herself against. Maybe it was just people who knew him showing up, and her being the door they had to knock on first. She had opened the door. That was all, and somehow it had been enough. The new year came. Desmond started a second round of treatment, this one harder, but he moved through it the way he moved through everything. One day at a time, with toothpicks and a Bible he didn't open in front of anyone, and the stubborn arithmetic of a man who was not done yet. Pruitt's Clean stayed open. Selah ran it. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, when Desmond came in for his shorter shifts, she watched him with the machine in slot 4, the one with the temperamental latch, and she memorized how he held his hand against it, at what angle, how long before the latch caught. She filed it away without telling him. Warren came by most Saturdays, not always with laundry, sometimes just to check. Bria started doing her homework at the folding table on the Saturdays he brought her in, spreading her workbooks across the surface with the territorial confidence of someone who had decided this was her spot. Selah didn't move her. One Saturday in February, Bria looked up from her reading log and said, "Do you like it here, in Mossfield?" Selah thought about it. "It's getting better," she said. "My dad says you came back because of your uncle." "That's true. But you stayed." "Yeah." Bria considered this with the gravity of a 9-year-old working through an equation. "Maybe you came back for him," she said finally, "but maybe you stayed for you." Selah looked at her. "Your dad know you talk like this?" "He says I got it from my grandma," Bria said, and went back to her reading log. In March, something happened that Selah would try to explain many times afterward, and never quite get right. A woman came into Pruitt's Clean on a Wednesday afternoon, late 30s, city clothes, rental car keys in her hand. She was passing through Mossfield on her way somewhere else, and she'd spilled coffee on her jacket and needed it cleaned. She watched Selah work, quick, efficient, the pre-treatment and the temperature setting and the cycle. And when it was done, she held up the jacket and looked at it. "Where'd you learn to do that?" she said. "Here," Selah said. "My uncle taught me." The woman looked around the laundromat. "You run this place mostly?" "He's sick, I'm sorry." She said it, the way some people do, quickly, and meaning it then. "Have you ever thought about doing something bigger with this? Textile care, restoration, that kind of thing?" Selah blinked. "Bigger like what?" The woman set the jacket down on the counter. Her name, she said, was Pam Whitfield. The other Whitfield, she clarified, which meant nothing to Selah, but apparently meant something in certain Atlanta circles. She ran a small chain of specialty cleaning services, high-end, mostly commercial accounts and some residential. She had been trying to expand into smaller markets. She was looking for people who actually knew what they were doing. "I don't know what you're looking for," Selah said carefully. "A manager," Pam said, "for a new location in Cartersville. Someone who understands operations, knows fabric care, can run a staff of 4 or 5. Selah waited for the part where she explained there was some condition, some asterisk. The asterisk didn't come. "I have a record," Selah said. "I know," Pam said. "I looked up the business before I stopped. I found your name in the state filings. I ran a background check, which I do on everyone I'm considering." She said it without apology and without drama. Aggravated assault at 21. 2 years served, no violation since. "You've been clean for 14 months out of a placement that doesn't have a great recidivism rate." A pause. "That tells me something about who you are." Selah put both hands flat on the counter. "It tells you I didn't mess up again." "It tells me you're determined," Pam said, "and determined is the only thing I can actually train around." She picked up her jacket. "I'm not in a rush. Think about it. Here's my card." She left the card on the counter and walked out into the thin March sunlight. Selah stood there for a long moment, alone in Pruitt's Clean, machines spinning in the background. The poinsettia Thea had brought at Christmas still alive, somehow in the window. She picked up the card. She didn't say yes right away. She asked Desmond first, which she hadn't planned to do, but found she had to, because some decisions are too large to carry alone, and she was still learning, slowly, the way the bone heals, that not carrying things alone was allowed. He listened. He didn't say much for a while. Then he said, "The machine in slot 4. What about it?" "You've been watching me with it for 2 months, he said. "You know how to work that latch. I've seen you do it. I learned from watching you." "Right," he said. "So you already know more than you think." He reached into his pocket for a toothpick. "Go to Cartersville, Selah. You can run that place. You know you can." "What about here?" He smiled then, the slow private kind he didn't often show. "Thea Coulter comes in on Mondays," he said. "Warren fixes things. That pastor brings food I pretend not to know about." He looked around his laundromat, the machines, the folding tables, the worn tile floor. "This place has been standing 23 years. It knows how to take care of itself." She called Pam Whitfield the next morning. She took the job in May. Cartersville was 40 minutes from Mossfield, which was close enough. She drove down on Sundays. She called Desmond on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And he answered on the first ring, which was more than she could say for the years before everything happened. Bria sent her a drawing in June. Pruitt's Clean rendered in colored pencil. Slightly wrong in proportion, deeply right in spirit, with a figure in the doorway that Bria had labeled in careful block letters. "Sell the lady. Let people in." She taped it to the wall above her desk in Cartersville and left it there. There's a thing people say about second chances, which is that everyone deserves one. It sounds right. It feels generous. But the truth is more specific and harder. A second chance doesn't mean anything until someone opens a door for you. It doesn't come from deserving it. It comes from someone deciding to see you past the thing that happened, and then you deciding to walk through. Selah Pruitt walked through a lot of doors in the year after she came home. Some she pushed open herself. Some were held open by an uncle who never asked too many questions, a man with a torn jacket and a daughter who needed her uniform washed, a woman named Pam who ran a background check and wasn't scared by what she found, and some doors she held open herself. At 7 minutes past closing, without thinking too hard about whether it was wise because someone was standing in the rain, and she had a warm machine and a little extra time. That was always the beginning. It's always the beginning. You just have to decide to leave the light on.